Hi, and welcome to Voices for Medical Freedom. I'm John Stockton, along with my co host and partner in freedom, Mr. Ken Rutgers. Today, we have a very special guest, Miss Jennifer Sharp. Jennifer, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me. I'm very excited to talk about this always.
Well, we've been excited to talk to you. Let's just give people a quick update on some of the things. You're a award-winning director, editor, and writer, which has so much to it, and we won't be able to dig into all of it. You had a dream of doing a movie in Mexico. Una, great
Una,
movie. Is that
yep, Una, great movie. It's a great movie, but it's with Mexico too. Una, great movie.
Is that's the one, or is it Solitary Worlds? You have another one, Solitary Worlds, where you just did it out of your cell phone. You just took the lead and said, "I'm doing a
Yeah.
movie."
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. On my in Honduras, I was traveling and I ran across this story and I was like, I wasn't planning on it. All I have is a cell phone and I did it. And that's making movies, right? That's like telling stories. So yeah, that's Solitary Worlds.
My first thought was, "Who does such a thing?" But then I saw some of your other movies, Waiting, about spending your entire lives waiting for your dreams to come true, about baggage, things we carry with us
Yeah.
that hold us back from accomplishing our dreams, and then Dare to Dream what you cannot imagine. I mean, just real quickly, what causes a person to, first of all, think that clearly about our own life and about other people's lives, and seeing what holds us all back, and being able to move that into a movie? Can you just touch on that a minute?
Yeah, it's a drive and it's a love for art and telling stories. And me as a filmmaker, I get inspired by telling my truths and opening worlds to other people. So for example, in Solitary Worlds, I it's about these workers in Honduras. It's a documentary who work for like $10 a month, a day, a week. I forget at this point what it was, but really cheap for years. And these millionaires' property, and the millionaires come maybe once a year or every 2 years, and for the rest of the time, they're just alone on these properties. And I like to just open people's minds to different things. And because that's how we learn about each other and that's how we grow. So as an artist, I'm inspired to do that. So I realize all my movies have these themes, or they're inspired by something that's truthful and something that I want to share and have you look at things a different way. And it's something in me and I do it. And luckily I've been doing it since I was 6. I've been telling stories, and this is all I've ever wanted to do. So I get to this point now where I'm in, mid-career, like still doing stuff. And when this Anecdotals vaccine movie but documentary we're going to talk about happens, I was like, well, because I've been doing this so long, I can edit, I can direct, I can production design, I can produce, I can do effects, I can do the titles. So I don't need much money to tell this story, and it's really important. So, like, it's also really hard. Filmmaking is expensive. So, when you're going to go through it and put your money into it, it's got to be something you love and something that inspires you, for me.
So do you wake up in the middle of the night sometimes with just, "Hey, this has been bugging me. I saw this today," and you get up, write it down, and start on that path? Is that kind of how the inspiration hits?
Totally. And like right now, I'm like, I want to make another feature film this year and I want it to be fiction, not documentary. So what happens in my mind is I keep thinking of all these story ideas. I think I want to shoot it in Ohio because that's like my hometown. And I start thinking about what can I afford, or who can I get to start, who can I ask for money? Like who might be wanting to support this? And so I start thinking of ideas. And the thing is that I keep stopping because I lose interest. And then I realized, what I really have to break down is like, what is important to me right now? Like, what is going to keep my interest? What is going to make me want to sit for hours and write and put some money in? And so where I am right now is I'm really thinking about trying to get together, low budget, but low budget to me is still good because I can do everything really cheap. Like I don't have to hire out a bunch of people. It's still very good quality. But what is inspiring me right now is the lack of communication politically, and which is inspired by my COVID journey, but right now with the election coming up, you got all the Democrats saying, if you don't vote for Biden, you hate democracy. And then you have all these, Republicans, saying, their thing. And I'm in the middle of both worlds because health freedom movement's very there. So I want both sides to understand. So right now in the movie, I'm thinking of trying to get done by election, or at least by inauguration in January, is going to be kind of about like some underground meetings where it's like Black Trump supporters, Biden supporters, or whatever, and like just kind of deal with the different worlds. But the fact that we can all interact as humans and we don't know each other's politics, but once we know our politics, everything matters and hate comes in and we can't be friends and I'm judging you. But if you don't know my politics, like we're just humans. Doesn't matter if you're a Trump supporter, doesn't matter if you're a Biden supporter, doesn't matter if you're not going to vote. So that's what's inspiring me. So that's what I think. I'm always thinking, like, how can I tell that story and how can I make it poignant and how can I make people reflect on themselves and think?
Well, we would add, Ken and I think would add to that, that there's a third candidate, Robert F. Kennedy Jr., that we'd sure like people to think about and be bold enough to make that step, because I think
Yeah.
he's special for this time in our history. And anyway, you gave a great segue to your documentary Anecdotals. You can see it back over your right shoulder there. As we were talking beforehand, I've watched it twice already in a very short period of time, and I'm going to use this documentary to send to people because I'm always amazed at how I can't get through. I mean, how can people see what they're seeing, even in their own little environment, and not understand what's really going out there? And I think this documentary is phenomenal, by the way. And I mentioned to you before, you mentioned it's free online, anecdotalsmovie.com,
Yes. No
and it's
ads, easy to share. So, people don't have to sit through a commercial. I did not monetize it. I did it all for free because I want this out. It's a good one to share because I made this movie for the pro-vaccine people. Because I'm in the middle so much that I'm like, there has to be something that will make people think, or that's my goal. A lot of the documentaries that come out about vaccine reactions that are beautiful, brilliant, wonderful documentaries, but they kind of inspire us all to be angry, and like, oh, he's a liar and put him away, and oh, look at this again, and here's the horrible music with the blood clots, and it scares people away. And those are great movies. But when I did this one, I'm like, this is actually for the people whose minds can be open, but they just haven't heard things yet. So I encourage people to share it with those people, share it. I've gotten so many letters from people who were like, I didn't know until I saw your movie that this was possible. I didn't know. And I even had a screening in Los Angeles a month ago, and this woman came up to me and she was like, thank you for making this. She was like, I was about to get my third booster. And I've been thinking it just doesn't really make sense. And I don't want to get another booster. And I went to my doctor and said, what do you think? And my doctor was like, no, you should get it. But then she realized, and she was like, I didn't feel right, but I was going to follow my doctor's. But then I watched this and you've totally opened my eyes to things. And she's like, I'm not getting any more boosters. And my goal isn't to stop people from getting vaccinated. You can still get vaccinated after but my goal is to just bring awareness to things maybe you haven't thought of. And that might make you question putting more of this in your body. And if you're someone who thinks, oh no, it's definitely worth it, then that's great too. But you should just be educated.
Well, I mean, before we get any further down, I know what an anecdotal is, but maybe some of what is an anecdotal, or what
Yeah.
are anecdotals?
Anecdotals. So what's funny is I actually had to look that word up because I thought I knew what it meant. But when I got injured, I took the Pfizer. I took the Pfizer one shot March of 31, and I was like paralyzed and stinging and couldn't feel my face and all the left side and all this stuff. And it was going on I mean, it went on. I'm still having it. It's 3 years later. But it varies. But it was pretty bad for like the first 6 months. And I got sick of seeing media say, it's safe and effective, it's safe and effective, it's safe and effective. And I'm Trevor Noah, safe and effective, the View, safe and like the things, I'm just like, all these people are saying it, but no one's talking about the injuries. And there are a lot. So I decided I was going to do one post on Facebook about my injury. And I don't put things on Facebook much, and I don't like to get political on Facebook. It's not the place for those discussions. It's not healthy. So I started my whole thing by saying, this is not political, but I just kind of want you guys to know that reactions do happen. This is my story. And it was very like, and I said, I'm not saying don't get vaccinated. I was very cautious, but hey, this is what happened. There are some. And somebody put in the comments, you are morally and ethically irresponsible for posting this. You should take it down right now. You could be responsible for people dying, for not getting vaccinated. Your story is only an anecdote, so you should take this down. And I thought I knew what anecdote meant, but when he said it and the way he put it's only an anecdote, I mean, I was like, but anecdotes they're truthful stories. So I actually looked up the definition, and I start the movie with the definition, and it basically means, in the definition, it's not necessary. It's your own experience. It's personal experience stories, not based on science. So therefore, it's not scientifically, you can't scientifically say this is true. But something that like Dr. Ryan Cole says a lot is he's like, science starts with anecdotes. Like you don't start doing research until enough people tell you their story that like, oh, this happens when I look at the sun, this happens. Let's start doing science. If you don't have anecdotes, you don't even start with science. So they go one in one. And then also the point I make like at the end of the movie is I'm like, things are so divided right now, and there's so much political motivation with the CDC, the FDA, intertwinement in government, with red versus blue, with pro-vax and anti-vax, that there's no clarity. And I feel like right now in this world, like especially with COVID vaccine reactions, anecdotes, which is just people's stories, not validated by science, but they're actually the most truthful reporting on this we have right now because everything else is so biased.
Yeah, data, there's books out. I think Bill Gates has even acknowledged it, how to lie with statistics, how to lie with data. And it's easy. And you can see it when they simply Bree Dresden, who's in your documentary, her husband's a scientist who did these tests. And he even said, you do the test case gets a COVID shot, the placebo test gets the pneumococcal pneumonia vaccine shot. And so when they compare the test group with the placebo group, the results are the same. And that's what they advertise. The results are the same. But it is such a lie. It's such an
Yeah.
untruth that it boggles the mind that they actually do this as a practice.
Yeah, so many things have boggled my mind that they actually do. And I was no like sucker before this. You know what I mean? Like I did not like I trusted everything, but yeah, I mean just the straight out lying. And this is where I am doing my work personally as a human, where it's like it's so easy to get angry. Like I just watched the new Senate panel hearing whatever on uh COVID protocol or whatever. And they had the CDC, they had Peter Marks from the FDA, and they had someone from the CDC, and they had one more person, and they were all being questioned about the handling of COVID and the COVID vaccines and stuff. The COVID vaccines, really, I forget. It was like this hour-long panel, and everybody was like, let's watch it. And this was like 6 weeks ago. And he just sat there and lied still. And he's like, well, we still don't have data that these reactions are for sure. And this is the head of the FDA saying this. They know it for sure now. And they know about myocarditis. They know about neurological stuff. And he sat there and lied. And the other really angry thing, I got so angry. I could only watch 10 minutes of it. I'm going to watch the whole thing, and I'm going to make a little breakdown movie about the things he says um, once I can handle it. But it's just the thing is like every senator that questioned him they all but like two started their question with, hello, thank you for being here. And, it's really great. We're going to get to, the bottom of some things we can fix. But first, we do know that the vaccines were very safe and effective, and it's very important to get vaccinated, and they have really helped our world. And that every senator said that at the beginning of their questioning. So it was like, that was the whole climate of it. And I was like, wow, like we really have to keep prefacing it with, but vaccines are good. And I feel like there's enough notice now to not have to say that, and to understand that the vaccines really aren't good.
Well,
Not a
I got interviewed the other day, to a bigger interview than I normally am doing these days. And this guy asked me, and he was good. He was, he wanted to hear my story and hear it out. And he said, you ever thought about going maybe to med school and getting to where you are more informed about this stuff? And I went, wait a minute, just think how you just asked that question. Like med school is the only place where I can get information that is applicable to this. I said, maybe that's the problem, is you think that's the only place I can get good information. And so it hit me like a ton of bricks right there in the middle of an interview. But so sorry for that little
No,
anecdote
I love
comment.
that. No, but that's the truth. You have to start listening to the wording of people,
Yeah.
and like everything's buried in wording. Like for example, in Minneapolis, I don't know if you've seen this that's been going around. There was actually a public news station who did a story on vaccine injured, like a 5-10 minute story on vaccine injured on like whatever KLAA or whatever this big Minneapolis news station is. So everybody's like, yes, yes, go like it, watch it on YouTube, show that this is important. We're not covered in the mainstream like this. So everybody's excited, but I watch it, and it's based on this latest CDC vaccine study. And sure, it's great that we're talking about vaccine injury. It's great that the mainstream's covering it. But in the first half of the program, it's all about how it's rare. The first sentence, rare reactions do happen. Like they have, you start hearing these things where it's like, it's rare. And then they're saying there's no solid study that shows there's neurological damage from the vaccine. And that's what the CDC just came up with too. There's no study. But then in the next breath, they say they say it's 600 times more likely that you'll have neurological damage from COVID than from the vaccine. And I'm like, how can you say that? Like, there's no study that says that either. Maybe there's no study for either, but they're saying there's no study for vaccine injured, but actually there are studies, and there's millions of us and around the world, and there are studies. But to say then definitively that it's 600 times more likely to have neurological reactions from COVID than the vaccine, it's like you have to listen to the wording, because that wording is so subtle, but it gets in people's minds to be like, oh, but COVID's worse, but COVID's worse. And it downplays everything. So that's it, like downplaying. It's very important.
Repetitive messaging. We just
Yeah.
heard that in our last podcast, right, Ken? Repetitive messaging, and it pretty soon it becomes fact. So it was interesting to hear. By the way, Bree Dressen did a great job, as did Naomi Wolf. Talked about, you mentioned a couple times, they knew. Bree Dressen lays it out pretty good. She was part of the test. She
Yeah.
had volunteered for the test. She did it. She laid it out. She gave back information. Then they took her off the test, even though her information was valid. Who else? Naomi Wolf,
Oh,
the
yeah.
the Pfizer report. This is before any rollout of any vaccines. The Pfizer report talks about 1,100 deaths in 3 months. And was it 54,000 or 34,000 adverse events in a 3-month period, including stillborn births, all kinds of reproductive things that damaged women. And they knew it.
Yeah.
They knew it. And
They
so
knew
how do you duck that?
they know it now. I mean, they knew it then, because like that's one of the things people are saying now is like, oh, we only knew, we didn't know. Okay, we didn't know then. Although there were people from the beginning who knew, and they knew. And in Anecdotals, I flash, but if you freeze it, you can read some of it. Emails between Bree Dressen and
Right.
Peter Marks, and these are the
Right.
actual emails. And it's just like showing that they know. And she's like, we're having people commit suicide. We're having all this stuff. But even if they don't know it then, they know it now. There's so many reactions. There's so much, even the myocarditis. And that's the heart inflammation, which is giving people heart attacks. And at first they were like, it was only men under 20 that were at risk for myocarditis. And so that's what they were saying, or younger men and all this stuff. But like now it's like really out there, but we're still not talking about it. And like something that was interesting is when I shot the movie, one of my camera operators for one of the interviews showed up. And afterward, he's like a man in his low 30s. And he had had 3 shots at that point, or 2 shots, I think, whatever. He was fully vaccinated and double masked. So he was, he showed up, like ready with that. That's where he was coming from. And at the end of the interview, this is when I was interviewing my doctor, Dr. Korji, the naturopath in the movie. She talked about myocarditis. And afterwards, he was like, that was so interesting. What was that heart thing you talked about? And I said, myocarditis. And he was like, I'd never heard of that. Like, when I was like, yeah, actually, I can't believe that they're, especially young men, but everybody, but especially young men, that they're letting you get vaccinated and not even mentioning myocarditis. And Peter Marks says in the movie, oh, myocarditis, it's mild inflammation. Just don't exercise for a few months and you'll be okay. But if you don't know you have it, and especially athletes who are used to pounding through pain, oh, I'm a little short of breath today. Who cares? I'm going to keep going. Oh, I have a little pain. We don't care. As an athlete, you're putting all this on yourself, but you don't realize it's actually myocarditis. And because you're putting that pressure on yourself, you're putting the pressure on your heart, and it's eventually leading to these heart attacks. If you knew about myocarditis, you would not you'd stop exercising then. And maybe it's fine. Maybe you can get the vaccine, get myocarditis, just be aware and don't exercise. But they don't tell you. And I'm like, how does this like 32-year-old healthy guy get 3 vaccines and never once mentioned, hey, watch your heart. Myocarditis is a effect that could happen. And they don't tell you. Like it blows my mind. Like it's very hard navigating between anger and compassion.
It
Uh,
sure. When there was 1,100 deaths, that was kind of what got Ken and I into this, was athletes dying. And there was, gosh, now it has to be over a year and a half ago, we quit looking at the list, because how many do you need to make it a reasonable story for? But there was 1,100 athletes that died on the field. all of them vaccinated. Of course, they don't do autopsies to say it was from this, but almost all heart events. How does that happen? It's at 27 times the normal. I mean, 27 times the normal. And I don't know how people can't see it. But anyway, again, I get off onto my little subjects. Your documentary, you go over and over again. By the way, you just did a marvelous job. You let people talk. You are compassionate. You can see that you're into it and knowledgeable. And but you kept pushing, or your group kept pushing. We are not political. This is anti-political. And you really were stressing how divisive all this is. And it wasn't just political division, but it was also race division, vaccine division, all the above. So since you put so much emphasis on that in your documentary, you want to talk about it a minute?
Yeah, so that's one of the things being in the middle that so as I talk about this, I definitely get like people on the vaccine skeptic side who get angry because I am so nice and I am so like this is not political, but to reach the people, everybody makes it political. So you have to say you're not political. Like this is clear. It's the same thing about anti-vax. Like you have to say, I'm not anti-vax for these people to listen to you because everybody just calls you anti-vax. By the way, there's nothing wrong with anti-vax. Like, so the anti-vax people get really mad at me for saying this. Like I get yelled at in the comments for saying, stop the anti-vax, you're making it negative. But the fact of the matter is, on the pro-vaccine side, anti-vax is a label. And if you say anything bad about the vaccine, you're called anti-vax. So you have to preface it. And in my movie, we preface it, I'm not anti-vax. We all got vaccinated, but we're still called anti-vax. So it's for the people that are calling us anti-vax to be like, this is not an anti-vax thing. I got vaccinated. It's not to say I'm not one of those crazy anti-vaxxers. Like, but it's a fine line. You know what I mean? Like people who are on the side of anti-vax will be like, what are you saying about us? And like, why are you making it seem negative? And it's not for that. It's the gentleness because I'm trying to gently connect with people. This is not political. It's not because for whatever reason, there's this wacky thing that like these extreme right-wing Trump supporters are crazy and they're also anti-vax. And there's this weird, horrible stereotype that has been put on the vaccines because of this crazy climate. And so everybody's like, this is not political. Like, don't make this a political thing. Don't make this an anti-vax thing. Like, we are just humans telling our story. I went on Fox News. I got interviewed on Fox News, and a couple of stations that I've interviewed on, I've talked to people and I've had many people say, don't do that. Like, don't go on Fox News. It's going to discredit you. This is the people, and this is not political, but this is the people on the left, right? They're like, what? You did Epic Times? You did Fox News? You're doing all this conspiracy theory stuff. Now we're really not going to believe you. Like now I can't believe you because you're on a wacky, like right-wing news source. And so it's my way of also like stopping the politicization. Like, why can't we talk to people who think differently than us? Like when is like, why not? Like, but if you do, suddenly I'm a conspiracy theorist, I'm an anti-vax and I'm not, and they won't listen to my movie. And I want people to listen to the message of the movie and not get caught up in their labels. So that's why I make it clear, like, it's not political. It's not anti-vax, pro-vax. It's just human stuff.
Well, and I'm sure that if MSNBC or The View or CNN asked you for an interview, I would guess you'd be like, sure, I would love to do that interview. But so why are they not asking?
So a lot of reasons, but MSNBC, I did hire a publicist for a while and I was like, please get me left-wing media. I've emailed NPR like every day for like, not anymore, but like a year ago. I mean, when I was like NPR, I've listened to NPR my whole life. There's so many news programs on NPR that would have a great discussion about this movie and vaccine injury. NPR wouldn't touch it. MSNBC, my publicist went to, had a connection there. And that person said, even if I wanted to cover this, I couldn't cover it. He said it would be political suicide to cover this movie. And that's what the reporter at MSNBC said. It's political suicide. You're not allowed to do anything that could cause vaccine hesitancy.
Well, okay, so you watch the movie, is people sharing their true stories.
Yeah.
So all of a sudden the truth is going to get people fired. I mean, what does that say about just that little space right there? What do you think that says about, you're in media, what do you think that says about where we are as a society?
It's really dismal, and to me, that's actually, the word democracy is thrown around a lot these days, and I'm like, that's like the least democratic thing, like people not wanting to hear true stories, not wanting to hear people talk. I don't have to be right. Like one person wouldn't watch my movie, and he's very pro-vax, and he was just like, and he said, I don't know him, but he put it in a comment, and he was just like, from the beginning, anecdotals, it means it's not scientific. Why would I watch this BS? And it's like, and he goes, and then they were like, they actually said, obviously the filmmaker doesn't know what anecdotals means because it's not scientific. That they're right there, they got themselves, gotcha. And I'm like, no, actually, I start the movie with the definition of anecdotals. Like, these are stories and we should hear them. But yeah, it's scary. So one of the things, is censorship, and we've all censored. Like, I have a Vimeo account, which is what filmmakers use to edit and post things. And like, they canceled my account for this movie without telling me, took everything down, canceled it, said I violated CDC headlines. So luckily, I knew enough to start a different Vimeo account for Anecdotals, because I do have a filmmaker page that has like my 20 years of films and my reels and everything. And if they would have just shut that down, it would have crushed me. But I did have just an Anecdotals, but it was only the movie, and they're like, no talk. I had just paid, $290 for a year membership, and they wouldn't give me my money back. And it's like that too. Like, on all these social medias, you're not allowed to talk about it. And then we found out that I wasn't like with Elon Musk and the Twitter files, when stuff started coming out with what was going on with the government and Twitter, that there was a document that is written by the Stanford group that was funded by the government, which was supposed to oversee censorship of social media during the COVID stuff. And they went to the social media, and this is there in writing. It says you must censor and cancel or whatever anybody who is causing vaccine hesitancy, even if it's true. Like, it even said that from the government, even if it's true, if it can cause vaccine hesitancy, it must be censored. That is crazy. Like, that's the state we're in. Even if it's true, they're so into guiding and manipulating how they want us to think. That's not okay. And that's not democracy. Like, that's not, and it's just like, I don't, I mean, I've gotten in arguments, and I probably shouldn't go here, but, I was talking to some relatives who, like, we kind of got into it about all this. And they were like, if you don't vote for Biden, Trump is the end of democracy. They were like, Trump is the end of democracy. And if you don't support Biden, and I'm voting for Kennedy, that's right off the bat. I don't care if he's on the ballot or not, but that means I'm not voting for Biden. And that means I'm supporting our world becoming undemocratic. And let's just say, and then I just said to them, I was like, okay, but do you understand that the Biden administration is censoring truthful content? Is that not anti-democracy? Like, and so I'm just like, it's just, people get so blind. And I'm like, sure, Trump can be end of democracy too. Fine, let's say he is. But I have to say, like, we've had him for 4 years, and democracy didn't end, but right now it is ending. I mean, like, it's just crazy. You can't even say the truth. So
Yeah, it feels like it's ending in a hurry. Well, so but back up a little bit to why you got into this. So you were injured by the vaccines, and you got what we were talking about, paresthesia.
yeah.
But before that, you're 40. Well, backtrack a little bit more. When I retired from playing basketball, I had an opportunity to go play some beach volleyball, and my teammate 2-on-2 was the great Alan Allen, who was one of the greatest volleyball players of all time by any. You look at all the, you look, just Twitter it, whatever you do, and he was awesome. And he made it look so easy. What a wonderful player, great teammate he was. But I was brutal. And you're running around in deep sand, and you're trying to jump, and you can't run. And I mean, it's humiliating for me, who considered myself an athlete. And so you were doing this into your 40s prior. I mean, you were competitive beach
Yeah.
volleyball player until you received the shot.
Yeah, well, actually, so it's a little before the shot. Like, I was competitive in my 30s. So I've always been very healthy, very active. I had to stop before the shot because of my knees. Like, unfortunately, when you compete professionally, competitively, you should start when you're 20 or 18. I started when I was 30. I played volleyball my whole life, but I started being like, I can go pro. I got to qualify for the AVP. So I went hard in my 30s. So the reason I had to stop playing was really because my bones were my 40-year-old bones and joints were like, you are going to swell up and not walk if you keep playing. So that's what stopped me. But then I do keep going out and playing more recreationally when my knees are good. So back and forth. So yes. And then I'm so I'm always very active. I teach cycling, I teach yoga. I still play beach volleyball like once or twice a month, and then my knees get big and I take 2 months off. So like that's kind of my life now. But yeah, and so with the vaccine, that's why it's even more like I was super healthy. There was never a reason for any of that stuff. And then I took the vaccine, and and I sometimes I wonder because like the night I took the shot, I taught a spinning class. Like I was teaching and I was like, should I get a sub? And then I was like, oh no. So I got the shot and then I went straight to my studio and taught a spinning class. So there's a part of me that's like, maybe that's why my reaction is so good compared to so many other horrible reactions. Is I was like, maybe because I was exercising right away. It's total conjecture. Like there's nothing, I have no clue. You're always wondering though, when you do things like, what if I had done this? Or would it have been worse? Or would it have been better? Or if I would have just gone the next day, I wouldn't have gotten the same batch. Like, there's all these questions. But definitely as far as health, and I had even like 3 months ago, it's been 3 years. It was March of 2021. So it's been over 3 years. And even it was like 3 or 4 months ago, I had a weird numb spell on the left side of my body. I started in my hip partway through the day. I realized I couldn't feel it. And this has happened before, but not for a long time. And then as the day went on, it went down to my knee and it went up to kind of my armpit. And I got in bed and I was just poking my body and I'm like, I can't feel any of this. And I was just like, I was up at like 2 a.m. Googling multiple sclerosis. Like, are these beginning signs of multiple sclerosis? Like, what is happening? So weird. And then it took like a full till the middle of the next day for it all to just dissipate, and it hasn't happened again. But it's like these are just weird body things that I know I didn't have before. I mean, and that's the thing. It's like, it's the vaccine. It's the vaccine.
Well, the problem with you, very much like Brie Dressen, very much like Ken's wife Cheryl, you guys look beautiful. You look beautiful. I mean, you're bright, you're happy, you're mobile, you just look great. Yeah, you're telling me you're sick. I don't buy it. So, but then that's one of the things your documentary did so well. Like Brie Dressen lays it out. She's in tears. Her story about possibly committing suicide and the explanation how it led up to that and why it was tear jerking. And it was one person. I keep mentioning Brie because I know her. We've had her on the show, and Cheryl, of course, we know really well. Maddie DeGarry, that story, her mom's pleading with people to hear this story. One person after another, you get them on there and they're telling their story. How could you possibly argue? How
Yeah.
could a person argue against it?
Yeah. And yeah, exactly. And it's just funny because you're right. Like we look normal. And so people don't take us seriously. So we talk about it and then people just think we're preaching conspiracy theories. And like I was saying earlier or before we started, I'm in support groups. So even though I don't have these injuries, like I'm not crazy, I see the crazy injuries every day. I have a friend who's got one of the worst things ever, and she's been going from doctor to doctor to doctor, and nobody's helping her. And she's 40, maybe 50 years old, and she takes care of her 81-year-old mom. She lives in the projects in Harlem, like, and she's with her mom, and she's just told me that she doesn't think she's going to be alive another year. And I was like, well, how are you doing emotionally? We had a big talk the other night. And she goes, I just hope that I live longer than my mom because she takes care of her mom. Like her mom's 80, but she doesn't anymore. She can't. They've hired a worker because she's in her bed. She can't move. She can move sometimes, but then she's in bed for 6 hours if she tries to go to the store she can only go to work now 2 days a week because she has to, but they've let her work from home 3 days a week. But she's like, I'm really not effective. It's really horrible. She's like, I'm definitely dying. She's gone from doctor to doctor to doctor to doctor to specialist. She's getting no help. And she just hopes she doesn't die before her mom. And it's like these stories everywhere and you see it.
Well, a minute ago, you touched on searching yourself to see if perhaps you had MS and the aftermath of this. I was going to ask you, well, why are you sticking with this COVID battle? Why are you? So many people want to forget about it. It's old news. Come on, Jennifer, we don't need this anymore. There's some lessons, I think, is why you're doing it. Why don't you answer that? Why are you doing it? Makes
Well,
no sense.
Number one, because it still exists. Like there's still these injuries, and more people every day in our support groups are joining. And they're like, I just got my third booster and now my life is ruined. And we welcome them in, but it's like, you just did this. Like we've known this for 3 years. I feel so sorry for these people because they've had no clue. They just keep getting their shots. Eventually it catches up with them. They show up like horribly hospitalized, having to lose their money. So it's still, the thing is, it's a past because in society we've moved past it, but the injuries have not moved past. So like that's number one, is like it has not moved past. But then number two is that I just think it's important for everybody to start questioning the things that they thought were true, because that was like the biggest thing that I went through, was like things I thought were true are not true. I thought the FDA and the CDC were mildly fair. And you hear things and you hear like that Purdue Pharma had the biggest lawsuit and they did it, but you don't really get into it. But now that I've been in it, I want people to really understand there's some serious corruption. Um, and we even know it. I think everybody can agree with the opioid crisis. Like the opioid crisis, it killed generations of people. It targeted poor white communities, like Appalachia. Like they put it, their goal was to make money, and they were found guilty. They were found guilty. And the only reason they could keep doing it was because the FDA was in bed with them. So all these people died. So I feel like that's a non-political thing we can all agree on. However, they got found guilty for starting the opioid crisis, for lying about it being addictive, yet nobody went to jail. And they just were fined, and they're still in business. They're still in business and they just paid a fine. They're guilty. Things are wrong. Like things are wrong. So it's not just the COVID vaccine, it's going to be what comes next. It's about our rights, it's about our democracy. When they can like tell you to stay home, and like my sister owned a small business, and then they had like the mask mandate. And if somebody was caught in her store without a mask, she as the business owner would get fined like $1,000 the first time, 2,000 the second. And I'm like, do you guys see, it's not like really like we're now becoming our own policemen? Like it's fine if you want to put those restrictions on society, then put policemen at every store and show us that we're the police state that we are. So just the way things change, that's why I'm still on it too, because it's not just the COVID, it's about what's going on in our government, in our system, FDA, and it's about just kind of waking up to think the media is dangerous, everything is dangerous, and we need to start really thinking deeper. And once you see it, you get it. So those are my two things, like wake people up, and start talk. And then also COVID's not over. The reactions are not over. They're not over.
We had small businesses in my hometown here where one was a bar where they had to close down at 10 o'clock because COVID apparently came out at 10 o'clock at night. I mean, that makes a lot of sense. We had a health food store where the L&I, labor and industry, is that what it's called, comes in and says, you can't sell zinc. You can't sell zinc. So, and again, that somebody is policing that, and we're becoming our own rats. And it's really scary. And you think about all the times that the whole system, whether it's the CDC, the FDA, our own doctors broke their own laws. I mean, informed consent. You have to have written informed consent of everything that can happen. And we've seen doctors hold up the insert from the vaccine and it's blank.
It's blank.
There's no information. So nobody has given anybody information. Nobody has given true consent, therefore. So that's breaking the law. There's doctors take their code of ethics, and one of them is beneficence. And that beneficence says that you're not allowed, if you're my patient, I'm not allowed to give you something to protect Ken. It's against my code of ethics. They break that law. Then you talk about money. Dr. Paul Thomas, I watched a thing this weekend where he said if you're a doctor and your practice is at 90% vaccinated, you get X amount of dollars right in the barrelhead first to check. But also you're incentivized through all your other processes for an ear infection, for a broken arm setting or whatever. You'll get $150 per procedure if you're 90% vaccinated in your clinic. But if you're only 5% vaccinated, you'll get maybe $75. So they're constantly putting their financial thumb on you.
Yeah.
It's the
And
law.
Yeah, and these are the things people need to know. And like we know it on a surface level. Yeah, yeah, I saw Aaron Brockovich. Yeah, yeah, I
Yeah.
know there's corruption. Like, but like it's really, really deep, and people need to know this. Like that's exactly in my thing. Is like you need to know that.
Well, we early on, when we did the press conference with Johnson out in Wisconsin, by that time we were calling Bree Dressen Bree Brockovich, Bree Brockovich, yeah. And the challenge, of course, is I think uh, Brockovich, I think she had it much easier because she can take those companies to court.
Yeah.
She can actually sue them. Whereas with the pharmaceuticals, there is no product liability, and there is no other product that is free from liability.
Yeah,
So
then the vaccines. Yeah.
yeah, and that to me is like, wow, that's pretty crazy. What would be if you could make two or three or four, if you could make some changes, if you could wave a wand and change things, what would be the things you would do to remedy, um, especially the political policies or but any of those areas?
Everything. Okay, so let's see if I can keep them all in my head. First thing I would do is like the two things that Kennedy says he's going to do right off the bat, which is stop pharmaceutical companies from marketing on television, from having commercials. Like we're one of two or three countries in the world that allows pharmaceutical companies to market directly to the public. And I used to think, yeah, that's kind of crazy and like that doesn't make sense, but not the hugest worst thing. Whatever, they're doing these commercials, you know. But then I realized the problem isn't that the public is like, oh, I want that, I want that, I want that. They're not getting to us. The problem is that now they control the media because it's that commercial ad space that the media is getting. It's the Super Bowl commercial. There was a Super Bowl commercial about the COVID vaccine. So it's like, that's like, I don't even know, 20 million. I don't even know, like, I don't have the scope of like how much they spend on advertising. But now that they can spend on advertising, the media stations are beholden to them, whether they're doing it consciously or not. So that's why it's dangerous to have them be able to market. It's not that we're going to fall for it. It's that they are now controlling the media. That's something Kennedy said he was going to take away like right away. Another thing he's talked about, because he knows this, and and this is, it's just, and I agree, like get rid of the infiltration and the corruption between the FDA, between the government and these organizations. Like all these, like they are in bed with each other on so many levels. And so many members of the FDA, after they retire, they go and work for pharmaceutical companies. It's a revolving door. So get rid of that. Like I would totally I would get rid of all of that. And I think that's also easy. I mean, and people are like, that's hard, that takes time. I do know that because like Kennedy has been involved in this type of stuff. He's actually said, I've listened to his interviews and he's like, I know who to get rid of and who not to. I know what positions to do. So it takes someone who understands it. But like that's a huge thing. And another thing I would do is I would fund a huge scientific like a building discovery, of a vaccine injured, and not just COVID, but like to study vaccine injury and have a hospital for vaccine injury, or I don't know, like, but and put a lot of money towards it. Because the thing is that since there hasn't been a lot of great studies, and it's partly because of money and because people want to keep getting funded by the pharmaceutical and the intertwinement with the government. So I would think there needs to be a facility that studies these people, and everybody who's vaccine injured can go and can get tested and really put money, because it's not just the COVID vaccine. And that's another reason why I still do it now, right? Because it's like there are people who are still fighting like autism battles and Gardasil, and there's stories, there's anecdotes from every vaccine, but they haven't been studied really. Like they haven't. So I would say we need to really get on it. That includes the autism. That includes, people just shut you down because they don't want you to be vaccine hesitant. But what I've learned is that like I've now joined a community of just COVID vaccine injured, but then I go around and show my movie around the country, and all these people come out who have been in this battle for 30 years. Like, so everything I'm like, wow, this is bad. Let's fight this. They're like rolling their eyes at me and patting me on the back and like, welcome to the club, you young one, now you know what we've known for 30 years. So, and then I'm just like, but at least it's happening on a bigger level now. So maybe we're helping you. So, who knows what's going on with the vaccines? All I know is like what everybody's saying is the soundbite right now on our end, but it's a true soundbite that like when we were growing up, there were 6 vaccines that we would get. And now if your kid got vaccinated, everything recommended on the schedule, they would have not vaccines, but the amount of shots, because some of them are like double, triple shots, they would have like 70 shots by the time they're 18. So if that doesn't tell you something's wrong and that the vaccine industry is really, and also just the fact that the COVID vaccine is recommended by the CDC for anybody 6 months and older. I believe we are one of the only countries that says 6-month-olds should have it. There are other countries that are like, I think the UK, I forget which countries are which, but like nobody under 50 is even allowed to get the Moderna vaccine because of the heart issues. Um, there's also many countries that don't recommend it for anybody under 12 or 16. So I mean, even if you go with that, like, why are we recommending it to 6-month-old? The only reason is to get it on that childhood vaccine schedule so that the pharmaceutical company makes money, because that's where you get your bankroll's. It's on the schedule, you're going to get it. So there's things that are wrong, and it's not just the COVID vaccine, and it's been going on for years.
It also doubles their liability protection once it's on the schedule. So there's a lot
Yes.
to it. Well, you talked about I'm not an anti-vaxxer there, and yet, and again, you've proven it. And I guess I could say the same thing. We vaccinated our children. I was vaccinated growing up, much less, of course, but did the flu shot a couple times during my early in my career. But I am, and this is the Irishman in me, I think we kind of tend to pick fights and make up later type deal. But I am absolutely anti-vax and proud of it. And but that's been earned. And it's been earned by their deception. It's been earned by the fact that I think Robert Kennedy says these pharmaceutical companies are serial felons. To your point earlier, they've been fined hundreds of billions of dollars, but to them, it's just, oh, here, that's just pocket change. I'll just pay that out. It's the cost of doing business, and those police organizations get their financing from that, so they're happy with their little token. It's an ugly business. So when you were doing your video, you had a when you did anecdotals, you did a section where you showed these CNN guys, and I'll let you name the guys if you want to, but the venom in which they were saying their comments, these are supposed to be guys that are um, giving the news objectively, and there's venom in this, and there's anger in it, and they're giving their point. Does that make you angry when you see that?
Yeah, and it made me angry when it happened. That's why I could put that in the movie, because I remembered that. I remember Don Lemon saying, "Leave them behind. We're sick of you anti-vaxxers. You're stupid. Leave you behind." Biden came out and said that. He was like, "It's going to be a long, cold winter of death if you're not vaccinated." And I just remember thinking, on a human level, I'm like, even if even if there was nothing wrong with the vaccine and there was no corruption, just because someone decides they don't want to put it in their body, like, why are we celebrating people losing their jobs and calling them names? And yeah, it was, I mean, everywhere you looked, and still everywhere you look, and like The View, and like, not The View is just all over the place. It's not like they hold that much cred, but like they have so much publicity that whenever I turn on, like, they're everywhere, so you see it. It's like they're not. But Rachel Maddow, and this is left-wing media. I mean, right? So then that's where it becomes political, because it just seems like this whole left narrative becomes that, and they're being angry, and they're like, leave them behind. And meanwhile, I can't go to my friend's funeral because I'm not fully vaccinated, even though I was injured. Like, my friend died, and there was a memorial service here, and only fully vaccinated people can go. And they're being egged on by these media that are like, no, people are going to get vaccinated. It's a public health crime. It's a public health issue. And it's just like, and nobody cares. So I'm like, yeah, they need to take responsibility for what they've said too. Like, because it's been proven now that you can spread it, and that is not what you thought it was. Even if you think it's still worth it because it'll make it less, or whatever you're still believing, you have to believe that you have the right, I mean, like, to not get vaccinated. But even if you just don't want to get vaccinated, like, you do have that right. I'm a full my body, my choice person. That makes sense to me, like, on all sides. Like, just, it's my thing. Leave me alone. So it was really weird for me to see the left-wing media going so aggro and angry. That was weird, because that was like my side, people who I thought were sane, and then I just started wondering, okay, and I see how that media is making my friends and my family irate, venomous, calling me anti-vax, getting in fights, because they've been fed that. And then I also see the people on the right, and I always wondered how people could hate Obama so much, or whatever. I mean, like, you don't have to like him, you think he didn't, but people are like, oh, he's the worst president ever, all this stuff. And then I was like, you don't have to like him. He's not the worst president ever. I would just think, so then I'm like, oh, they must be racist or whatever, right? But no, it's not. It's their media is feeding them the same angry, vitrolic things over and over. And when they hear it, they're like, oh, yeah. And they show the same soundbite and you fall for it. And I fell for that with Trump, honestly. I don't like Trump. It doesn't matter. I won't vote for Trump. But I didn't need to hate him the way I did. But the reason I did was because every time I turn on my media, they're like, and Trump did this. And they're showing 4 times in a row him saying something hateful and angry and racist. But they don't, you keep seeing that. And then you're put into this frame of mind, like that's true because I heard him say it. But have you listened to all the speeches? Do you understand, what everything? I don't know, like it's those sound bites. It's very, very dangerous.
Yeah, back to that repetitive messaging.
Yeah.
Yeah, they talked about, and you mentioned you were vaccinated and you couldn't go to the funeral, and how they played with that end line. So when they said only the unvaccinated are causing this problem, only the unvaccinated are people, you weren't even if you took the vax, you weren't considered vaccinated on that checked box for what, 14 days or 10 days afterwards.
Yeah.
So any ill effect, I mean, it was just such a playing with statistics that it angers you when you think about it, and that's why you have to continue the fight. At least that's why I think about it.
Yeah. Yeah. No, there's things that are wrong and you have to keep and this is going to be a long fight for me because Anecdotals, the movie, is becoming more and more relevant. Like when it came out, I think a year ago was when I first like put it out. I tried to get it out early, but no, the only people who wanted to see it were people who already believed. And that was great, but it was like, I'm trying to now is the time that more and more people are getting open to hearing things. So I feel like even in like 6 months from now or whatever, like there's going to be a hot spot for Anecdotals when it actually does cross the line. I mean, I just had a publicist I know pitch it to Chris Cuomo. Like if I can get on Chris Cuomo to talk about this, that's a huge step in crossing the line, but I still haven't, gotten to anybody on the left, like anybody. And Chris is like touting that he's like middle of the road, whatever now. But so it's really, really scary. And it's important to keep talking about it because the censorship is still going on. People are still getting boosters without knowing things. People are still spewing statistics. Somebody I talked to yesterday who was like, well, the vaccine, saved people aren't dying anymore. And I was, and she's like, I was a nurse in the ICU and I can tell you firsthand that it was bad. And it was the unvaccinated that were filling the ICUs. And I can't argue with the nurse, right? I mean, she says it, that's her anecdotal story, but there's many nurses and doctors who say the exact opposite. So it's like, let's not form these rash opinions and judge each other and think we know what the truth is. Let's just open and talk about this and understand that it's, two things can be true at once and many things can be false.
I heard a medical doctor talk this past weekend. It was quite a weekend, but I heard him talk this last weekend. And he said he was talking to his mom, who was on the side of, hey, you needed to get the shots, you needed to be protected, you needed to be safe. And he was on the other side. And he said, but mom, I'm a medical doctor. I'm for medicine generally. And she says, well, what makes you smarter than all the other doctors? Or you're the one, and you can just hear a mom saying that to her son. And it's kind of pretty funny. But moving forward, and we're running out of time. We've used a lot of your time, so we will let you go here real soon. What I'm seeing in my personal life, back to anecdotal or your own personal experiences, I'm getting friends all in that 70-year-old age that they were healthy, playing tennis. Life was great. They get the shots. Leukemia gone in 5 months. Cancer gone in 5 months. Anything that was irritating them beforehand, whatever diagnosis they had that they had under control, boom, gone in 5 months. I mean, funeral after funeral. Younger people calling and saying, listen, I suddenly have 40-year-old, I have cancer. And you kind of go, did you take the shots? And they go, well, yeah, of course I had to. And you go, so for me, I'm feeling like it's still the tip of the iceberg. As horrible as it is, and all the people that you showed on your show, as horrible it is, I think there's more to come. Do you think that, or am I off my
I'm
rocker?
really skeptical. Like, I think there's more to come, but I don't know that it'll ever be linked to the vaccine. Like, I know people who are sick, and I know someone who's severely vaccine injured, and she calls it long COVID. but she had 6 shots, like, and she didn't happen till the third shot, and then she got COVID somewhere in the middle, and she calls it long COVID. And it's okay, long COVID exists, and there's like interplay between both, but I just feel like there's a lot of not acknowledging. And like, 3 people I heard had breast cancer in 1 week that I knew. And I know the science. I've watched it. Like, this makes sense. There's turbo cancers happening. Somebody I know had a heart attack and had a stent put in her heart. She knew it was the vaccine, yet when she posted her whole story on Facebook about thank God for medicine, it saved my life, I'm better, I can breathe. It happened right after the vaccine. She never mentioned the vaccine. So I don't know how we're going to bring the truth out when they're not doing the autopsies and people still aren't acknowledging it. And somebody who I know is vaccine injured is calling it long COVID. And I actually told her, I said, you do not have long COVID, you have vaccine injury. And I do think they're intertwined. And she goes, well, I'd say I have both. And it's like, okay, cool, you have both. But it's like, and if we're not doing autopsies, how do we prove it? And then it made me think about, I don't know if this was a joke or a lie, but I definitely heard somebody say there's a new condition that they've named SADS, which is sudden adult death syndrome. And I don't know if that was a joke. I think it was true. I was like, but then it just made me suddenly be like, oh yeah, SIDS, sudden infant death syndrome. As soon as I heard of SIDS, I was like, oh, okay, I get it. There's a syndrome where infants just die, and that's what they call it. And now I'm like, no, like, I mean, who knows? But like, could that be related to the vaccines and like the infants getting vaccines? And I've read some now, and a lot of people are saying that it like happens more when they're vaccinated, and then that's when they die in their sleep. Like, this is vaccine reaction, but they just call it SIDS. No one questions it. They call it SADS. No one's questions it. So that's where I am. Is like, it's the tip of the iceberg. People are, more and more stuff is happening, but are people going to acknowledge it? And I guess that's what Anecdotals is going to help keep doing. I had a cousin who called me, and he had been sick for 2 years. Neurological, they call it the suicide syndrome because the pain is so bad that you commit suicide. You just can't live with it. So for 2 years, he's just been addressing his pain and like, but he can't live, like the headaches, the nerve, and he was like, I've gone to neurologists, nothing was wrong. 2 years into it, he watched Anecdotals, and he called me and he goes, I watched your movie and I realized that this is a vaccine reaction. And it took him 2 years of all kinds of doctors and nobody bringing it up to watch my movie and diagnose himself. He goes, it happened after my shot.
Well, I think that's one of the big, powerful aspects of your documentary. One of the things I really enjoyed about your documentary is when you were on camera and just you talking, you were asking questions. I mean, reasonable questions. And I think that's such a powerful, to me, those were powerful moments as you're reaching across to the other, to
Yeah.
that we're othering. But along the lines of John had asked about the future, but you're so well informed in this space, unfortunately, in some ways, because you're in that space. So now you get in the space, you get informed. Uh, what about on a more macro global, looking down the road toward more social controls through medicine, World Health Organization? What are your thoughts on those things that seem to be lurking out there, but coming out as fast?
Yeah, it's really scary what's happening. Like, there's the WHO, you know, becoming the leader, so like they can declare an emergency and we're all signing that they can declare there's a health emergency, and then they take charge and they make all the rules and all the countries have to follow, and like people are signing on board with this. Like, it's really scary, and it's happening in everywhere in other countries, and it's weird. It seems like the same thing happened in every country, and that's a weird thing. There was a Fauci in every country. There was a Senator Ron Johnson in every country. It's like, it's so weird how this has happened globally. The things that happened in Australia, Canada, super censorship now, and like people's bank accounts. And it goes cross, because I know somebody in the United States who donated to the trucker protests in Canada, and her bank account was frozen. And she's a US citizen with a US bank account. And because she donated to that in Canada, her bank account was frozen. So that's somebody I know for a fact. And I've asked her 3 times, okay, tell me, I want to be able to say this and know that it's true. Like, this really happened to you? She goes, yeah. And I'd heard it was happening to people. It's really scary. So when it gets on board and everything is so, I used to be one of those people that was like, people, government spying on you, like it happens, but I don't have any secrets. So like, whatever, like take my birth certificate, take my iris, my handprint, like whatever, not worried. Yeah, it seems wrong, but whatever. But it's like, no, once you realize it's like, no, once they have you, like, this is how you really get controlled. And what happens is when you start asking questions and when you become against the narrative, which is I don't want the WHO to tell me how to live my life. Like it's, even if COVID was as bad as they said, it's true. Like there are people in Wyoming where there's like, and this is the wrong stat, I'm throwing a stat. All statistics, 87% of all statistics are made up on the spot. So I'll say that now and I'll say 20, 20, like in Wyoming, like, there's like 2 miles between every two people or whatever. Like there's so few people and it's so spread out that like they don't need the same regulations that a city needs too. And regulations, like, no, like you gotta, it's really scary. It's really scary. Like I just can't, it's really scary. And what's even more scary is like I see all this stuff happening. Um, and so many people in my life don't want to talk about it and don't believe me and think I'm wacky. And I'm not even wacky. Like I'm just like, I just have facts. Like and I ask questions and I'm not, so it's really, really scary what's happening.
Well,
And it's
clearly
hard to
not
keep,
wacky.
yeah, it's hard to keep mental health. Like that's why I say this is my work, right? Staying compassionate. And then every now and then, I was doing podcasts for a while at the beginning, and then I got on one and we both got on this angry rant. And I was like, time for me to step back. I'm getting a little too angry. Like I'm not, but I'm trying not to be angry. I'm trying to share and be compassionate. And on both sides, I have to say, like I've been called names by people on the anti-vax side. I've been, people have said a lot of things. Someone in one of the comments, said everybody in my movie are morons anyway for getting vaccinated to begin with. And, there's just always things from everywhere. And it's just like, let's try to like calm down and like come together.
Well, every now and then we all need a little vent action. It's always nice to have somebody in your local area where you get to say exactly what you're thinking and get it off your chest, and then you can go back to being a reasonable citizen after that. So,
100%. That's why I love that. Like, I love talking to you guys. I mean, I get excited because I'm like, yes, we can talk and we understand each other, and I don't have to explain things. And you're not going to say, but Einstein was autistic or whatever, like all the things that people say about like, oh, how could it cause a bad, all this stuff. Like, yeah, it's really nice to have, it is nice to have a community. And okay, so what is also really what I loved, I went to this dinner last weekend and but it was with the California Children's Health Defense. And so it was a health freedom thing. And there was a guy there and, we were talking and basically the point was it got to the point where we're both voting for Kennedy. And like, Kennedy is like represents this, like, he's really good middle ground. Like he's not perfect. There's things I don't like about him for sure, but it does, but I think he's great for this time. And I think he's great. And this is one of the reasons we both realize we're voting for Kennedy. And I'm like, yeah, my relatives are saying I'm anti-democracy if I vote for Kennedy because Trump could come and he's not democracy. And this guy is like, I'm a super MAGA supporter. I have the hats. I'm a MAGA hat. I've been a MAGA guy forever. And I'm voting for Kennedy. And he goes, and all my MAGA people are getting on me for going to Kennedy because I have to keep my vote for Trump. And it was just funny, like we're both going through the same thing. We're coming together here. And I was like, that is so interesting. And that is so cool. It's so cool. I love that.
well, the great overall message coming together, not letting them divide us
Yeah.
and using our noggins a little bit. So, well, Ken, unless you've got something else, I think we need to let Jennifer go. Jennifer, you've been an outstanding guest, and if you need that person to vent with at some point in time after the show, we'll share numbers
Okay.
and we just scream at each other on the other end of the phone, and we'll be fine.
Thank you. I could definitely use that. It's a balance, but and then just as a reminder, the movie's free. Ask your pro-vax people to watch it, and you could even say, look, if you love me, watch 10 minutes of it. You don't have to watch the whole thing. And I always say, just ask somebody to watch 10 minutes, and then what's going to happen is that once you see it, you can't unsee it. And then also you're going to also understand that maybe 6 months from now when someone gets an injury and doesn't know it, like you're going to have seen it. So it's just 10 minutes. And then if you don't want to watch the rest, watch it. It's anecdotes. It's about people talking about their vaccine injury. It's a very gentle movie. It's, well done. So watch it. and share it. And anecdotalsmovie.com, it's free. And yeah, so
Fully intend to share it. Thank you. And it is outstanding. That last words on the subject, an outstanding documentary. Thank you.
thank you. Thank you.